You wake to the sound of morning hymns echoing through the compound. Your first breath carries the scent of incense, communal breakfast cooking, and the wildflowers that grow along the fence. Your father isn't just any man, he is the prophet, the chosen one, the vessel through which God speaks directly to humanity. At least, that's what everyone tells you from the moment you can understand words. You're born inside the compound, delivered by followers who believe your birth was prophesied. Your cradle is surrounded by people who call you blessed, chosen, sacred. But you're also a prisoner who doesn't yet know what freedom looks like. From your earliest memories, you're surrounded by absolute devotion. 200 people who hang on your father's every word. Families who sold everything they owned to join the community. Children who've never seen the outside world. Adults who cry with joy when your father touches their heads in blessing. This is your normal. This is the only reality you know. Your childhood is spent believing you're special. Not just loved, but cosmically significant. Your father tells you that you're destined to lead the faithful after he's gone, that your bloodline carries divine purpose, that the outside world is corrupted and evil. But you're safe here in paradise. You have no reason to doubt him. Everyone you've ever known confirms the same story. Your tutors aren't trained teachers. They're true believers who educate you in scripture your father wrote. History he's reinterpreted, and science he's decided is compatible with revelation. You learn that the world outside is controlled by Satan's agents, that governments and schools exist to corrupt pure souls, that your father saved everyone here from damnation, that leaving the compound means choosing hell over heaven. These aren't metaphors to you. They're facts as solid as gravity. Your father appears in your life like the sun, too bright to look at directly. He's busy with divine work, receiving revelations, conducting ceremonies, counseling followers who wait hours for 5 minutes of his attention. When he does focus on you, the intensity is overwhelming. He places his hand on your head and tells you he sees your grandfather's spirit in your eyes. He shares visions of the apocalypse that's coming, where only the faithful will survive. He explains that your destiny is already written in prophecy, but you must prove yourself worthy. You're 7 years old, desperate for his approval, terrified of his disappointment. He brings you to a private ceremony where the inner circle gathers. These are his closest followers, the ones who know secrets the regular members don't. He tells them you're ready for initiation into higher knowledge. You feel pride swelling in your chest. Finally, you're being recognized as special. The ceremony involves fasting, meditation, and drinking a bitter tea that makes the room spin. Your father speaks in tongues while followers chant. He tells you that you're feeling the presence of the divine, that the visions you're seeing are glimpses of truth beyond human comprehension, that you've been tested and found worthy. You vomit afterward, shaking and confused. But everyone congratulates you. They tell you you've been blessed with a spiritual experience most will never have. You learn to interpret your fear and confusion as enlightenment. From that day forward, your education becomes systematic indoctrination. You sit in your father's private sessions, where he explains the deeper meanings behind public teachings. You learn which rules apply to regular followers and which don't apply to the chosen few. You discover that your father has multiple spiritual wives beyond your mother. That money donated by followers goes toward preparations you're not supposed to question. That some people who tried to leave disappeared, and no one mentions them anymore. These contradictions create a tension you don't have words for yet. Your father teaches you how to read people, how to identify doubt in their eyes, how to reinforce belief through emotional manipulation. He shows you that control isn't maintained through logic, but through belonging. People don't follow him because his teachings make sense. They follow because leaving would mean abandoning their identity, their community, their purpose. By your 12th birthday, you've learned to see followers the way your father does. Not as individuals with autonomy, but as instruments serving a greater purpose. Resources to be managed, belief to be maintained, devotion to be harvested. You're being groomed not just to lead, but to think like a leader who views people as objects. But something happens that cracks your certainty. A new family joins the compound, refugees from the evil outside world. They have a daughter your age. Her name is Sarah, and she's different from the children born inside. She asks questions that no one else asks. Why can't we leave if we want to? Why does the prophet have special privileges if we're all equal in God's eyes? Why do the prophecies keep changing when they don't come true? You're taught to report doubters to your father, but you don't report Sarah. Instead, you start noticing things you'd trained yourself not to see. The way followers flinch when your father raises his voice. The exhaustion in your mother's eyes. The locked gate that's supposedly to keep danger out, but maybe keeps people in. Sarah tells you about her life before. Schools where teachers encouraged questions. Friends who had different beliefs but were still good people. Movies, books, music that your father says are tools of corruption. She makes the outside world sound like something other than hell. For the first time, you feel doubt. Not about God or spirituality, but about whether your father's interpretation is the only truth. Your father notices the change in you before you fully understand it yourself. He calls you to his private quarters at midnight. His voice is soft, concerned, fatherly. He tells you he's been having visions about you, that Satan is trying to corrupt you through the new girl, that your doubt is a test of your faith and destiny. He doesn't yell or threaten. Instead, he cries. He tells you how much responsibility he carries, how the weight of everyone's salvation rests on his shoulders. He says he's terrified of failing God by losing his own son to darkness. The manipulation is masterful. He's made you feel guilty for your own thoughts, responsible for his pain, terrified that your questions might doom everyone you love. You promise him you'll resist temptation. You promise you'll avoid Sarah. You promise you'll be the son he needs. But the doubt doesn't disappear just because you promised it would. The next months are a psychological war inside your own head. Part of you desperately wants to believe everything you've been taught. Belief is comfortable, certain, safe. Doubt is terrifying, isolating, dangerous. You watch your father more carefully now. You notice how his prophecies are vague enough to be reinterpreted. How his rules conveniently benefit him while restricting others. How people who question him suffer mysterious spiritual attacks that look a lot like punishment. You see Sarah being isolated, her family separated, her father sent to work the far fields alone. You understand this is because of your friendship. Your father is teaching you a lesson about the cost of defiance. One night, Sarah manages to pass you a note during communal dinner. It says, "They're planning something. My father heard the inner circle talking about the final test. Please help us leave." Your hands shake as you burn the note. You're 16 years old and you face a choice that will define everything. Report Sarah's family and prove your loyalty, or help them escape and become a traitor to everything you've known. You know what your father would say, that saving the unfaithful from themselves is compassion, that preventing their escape is protecting them from Satan's world, that your duty to God outweighs personal attachment. But you also know what you've seen in Sarah's eyes, not demonic possession or spiritual corruption. Just a terrified girl who wants to leave a place that's become a prison. You make your decision at 3 a.m. when the night guards rotate shifts. You steal keys from your father's office, your heart hammering so hard you're sure someone will hear. You lead Sarah's family to the service gate behind the storage building. You show them the path through the woods that the hunting parties use. Sarah's mother hugs you, whispering thanks. Sarah looks at you with something that might be love, or might just be gratitude. Her father asks if you're coming with them. And you realize you can't. Not because you're not allowed, but because you can't abandon your mother and the younger children. Because you still partly believe your father's warnings about the corrupted world. Because leaving would mean admitting that everything you've based your identity on is a lie. So you stay. You watch them disappear into the darkness. You relock the gate and return the keys. You climb back into bed and wait for morning, knowing what's coming. Your father discovers the escape at dawn. The compound explodes into crisis. Search parties, emergency meetings, prayers for the lost souls now wandering in Satan's territory. Your father's rage is biblical. He demands to know who helped them. He calls it the ultimate betrayal, proof that Satan has infiltrated the community. You stay silent along with everyone else who's too terrified to speak. But your father knows. He's always known how to read you. He calls you to stand before the entire congregation. He doesn't accuse you directly. Instead, he talks about Judas, about betrayal, about the pain of being betrayed by those closest to you. He asks if anyone has information about the escape. He says that confession will bring forgiveness, but silence makes you complicit with evil. You could confess, You could throw yourself on his mercy, but you realize that his mercy isn't real. It's just another form of control. So you stay silent, even as the weight of his stare tries to crush your resolve. After the meeting, he takes you aside. No anger, just deep sadness. He tells you he knows what you did. He says he understands that you were confused, manipulated by Satan through the girl. He offers you a path back to grace, a public confession, a rededication ceremony, and an elevated position in the inner circle to prove your return to faith. You realize this is the moment your father has been preparing you for. Not to succeed him through inheritance, but to be broken and remade as his perfect instrument. You're 17 years old and you choose to play along. Not because you believe, but because you're not ready to lose everything yet. You make the confession he scripts for you. You cry the tears the congregation expects. You accept the blessing of forgiveness and the burden of elevated responsibility. But inside, something fundamental has changed. You're no longer a true believer. You're an actor playing a role, waiting for the right moment. The next 2 years are a masterclass in surviving inside a system you no longer believe in. You learn to mimic faith perfectly while feeling nothing. You rise in the hierarchy because you tell your father what he wants to hear. You help recruit new members because refusing would expose your deception. You watch people surrender their lives, their money, their children to your father's vision. And you do nothing to stop it because stopping it would mean destroying yourself. But your father is changing too. His prophecies are becoming darker, more apocalyptic. He talks about the end times arriving sooner than expected, about the need for ultimate sacrifice, about a final test that will separate the truly faithful from the pretenders. The inner circle begins stockpiling supplies, conducting drills, preparing for something they call the ascension. You piece together what's being planned. Your father has decided that the world is beyond saving, that the faithful should leave it together, on their own terms, pure and uncompromised. That a mass suicide will be the ultimate proof of devotion. He doesn't call it suicide. He calls it graduation to the next plane of existence. But you know what poison looks like, even when it's mixed with religious language. You're 19 years old, and you face the choice you've been avoiding. You can try to expose the plan and save people who might not want to be saved. You can escape alone and save yourself while abandoning everyone else. You can drink the poison with everyone else and end the confusion of living between belief and doubt. Or you can try something almost impossible. You go to your father privately. You tell him you've had a revelation, that God came to you in a vision and said the prophet's son must survive to continue the work, that the ascension is for the faithful, but you're meant to remain as a witness to the world. It's a desperate gamble, using his own logic against him. Your father studies you with eyes that have seen through people for decades. For a moment, you think he knows you're manipulating him. But then his face softens. He says he's been praying about this very question, that perhaps God does need someone to survive and tell the story, that maybe your earlier doubt was preparation for this difficult mission. He's reinterpreting your deception as divine providence. It's the same skill he's used to manipulate thousands, and now you're using it on him. The night of the ascension arrives. Your father gathers everyone in the main hall. He speaks for 3 hours about sacrifice, destiny, and the paradise waiting beyond this corrupted world. People cry with joy and terror. Children are given the poison first, told it's medicine to help them sleep before the journey. You watch mothers administer it to their own babies, believing they're saving them. Your father drinks his portion after everyone else, the last to leave so he can shepherd his flock. You don't drink. You hold an empty cup and pretend to swallow. You watch 200 people die believing they're being saved. You watch your father's face as the poison takes him, still certain until the end that he was God's chosen instrument. You survive because you were always a better liar than a believer. The authorities find you 3 days later, catatonic among the bodies. The investigation determines you were spared due to divine intervention or psychological manipulation. No one can prove you helped plan it. No one can prove you could have stopped it. You spend years in therapy, trying to process what you witnessed, trying to separate the love you felt for your father from the horror of what he did, trying to understand whether you're a survivor or a coward. You give testimonies, write memoirs, appear in documentaries. Everyone wants to understand how this happened, how a man could convince people to kill themselves, how families could poison their own children, how you survived when everyone else died. But the truth is more complicated than the questions. Your father wasn't a cartoon villain who appeared evil from the start. He was a charismatic believer who started with genuine spiritual seeking, who built a community that provided real belonging and purpose, who slowly convinced himself that his authority came from God rather than his followers' need to believe. The transformation from spiritual leader to mass murderer was gradual, a series of small compromises, each justified by greater purpose, until drinking poison seemed like the logical conclusion of everything he'd taught. You spend your life trying to warn people about the signs, the leader who can't be questioned, the community that isolates members from outside contact, the belief system that divides the world into saved and damned, the gradual escalation of demands and sacrifices, the conviction that ends justify any means. But you also know that warning people isn't enough. Because your father's followers heard plenty of warnings, they chose belief over doubt because belief felt better. They chose belonging over freedom because isolation hurt worse. They chose certainty over truth because uncertainty was unbearable. You were born to inherit a kingdom built on faith. You were raised to be a prophet's successor. You were trained to control people through their deepest needs and fears. But you became something else. A survivor carrying the weight of 200 deaths you couldn't prevent. A witness to what happens when faith becomes absolute and doubt becomes treason. A warning about the price of certainty in an uncertain world. You're 40 years old now, and you still dream about the compound. Sometimes it's the paradise you believed in as a child. Sometimes it's the prison you recognized as a teenager. Sometimes it's just a place where people sought meaning and found death instead. You think about Sarah sometimes, the girl who escaped. You heard she built a normal life, married, had children. You wonder if she ever thinks about you, the boy who let her go but couldn't follow. You think about your mother, who died believing she was going to heaven. About the children who never got to question what they were taught. About your father, who died absolutely certain he was saving souls. And you live with a question that has no answer. Were you the only sane person in a building full of madness? Or were you the coward who survived by betraying everyone who believed? The world calls you a survivor. The news calls you a victim. The therapists call you traumatized. But you call yourself something simpler. The son of a cult leader who learned too late that love and manipulation can look exactly the same. That family in prison can occupy the same space. That the difference between prophet and charlatan is just which side of the story you believe. You spend your life trying to atone for surviving, helping people escape similar situations, speaking at universities about the psychology of control, writing books about recognizing manipulation before it's too late. But nothing changes the fundamental truth. You were born into a lie and raised to perpetuate it. You saw through it just early enough to save yourself, but not early enough to save anyone else. And you live with that math every single day. 200 dead, 1 survivor. And the question that haunts every dream. If you'd been braver or smarter or acted sooner, could you have changed the equation? Or was the ending inevitable from the moment your father convinced himself he spoke for God? You'll never know. And that uncertainty is its own kind of prison. One you built yourself by surviving,